He didn't ask for love. She didn't come for it. Two strangers, bound by necessity, standing on land filled with secrets. But sometimes, respect grows before love, and truth builds something stronger than either. This is a story where partnership is forged not in comfort, but in fire. Stay until the end.
The rain hit the glass of the boarding house window, hard, steady, like it was trying to wash the town of Crestwood clean off the map. Eleanor Preston, Nellie to the few who still bothered to speak to her, sat at a narrow pine desk. She didn't look out at the storm. Her eyes were fixed on the worn, leather-bound journal resting open under the weak yellow glow of an oil lamp. It wasn't a diary. There were no secrets of the heart in those pages. It was a ledger, a record of dirt, blood, and survival. She turned a page. The paper was brittle, stained with thumbprints of dried Texas clay. May, 1871. That was the year she figured out the irrigation trench. Thomas had wanted to plant down by the creek. She had said no. She read the land. She saw the watermark on the old oaks and knew the spring floods would drown the crop. She mapped the trench herself, dug half of it too. She turned another page. Winter, 1873. The shorthorn cattle caught the lung fever. Thomas had been ready to put bullets in their heads to spare them. Nellie had spent 3 sleepless days reading a veterinary text she'd ordered from St. Louis. She mixed the poultice. She walked the herd. She saved 20 head of cattle. But if you looked at the deed in the county courthouse, you wouldn't see any of that. You wouldn't see her name. You'd only see Thomas Preston. A woman in 1878 didn't own the dirt she bled on. She only stood on it. Nellie closed her eyes. The memory of the day she lost it all was still sharp. It tasted like copper and dust. August 1877. Thomas had been in the ground for 2 years. Hiram Vance had stood in her parlor. He didn't bother taking off his hat. He was a man who wore expensive woolen suits in the dead of a Texas summer, just to prove he didn't have to sweat like the rest of them. "It's a tragic thing, Mrs. Preston," Vance had said. His voice was smooth, oiled. "But a debt is a debt. Your late husband took a loan against this land. He signed the promissory note himself. The bank is simply claiming what is legally ours." He had held out a piece of paper, a copy of the note. Nellie had looked at it. She knew Thomas's handwriting better than her own face in the mirror. She knew the way he crossed his T's. She knew the heavy press of his pen when he was tired. The signature on that paper was a lie, a good one, but a lie all the same. She had looked up from the paper. She looked at Vance and the 2 armed deputies standing behind him. She was one woman alone on an isolated ranch. She couldn't fight them with a rifle. She would end up dead, and Vance would step over her body to take the keys. But she didn't just bow her head. She stood straight. She looked Hiram Vance dead in the eye, and she made sure the deputies heard every single word. "The law was created to protect the truth, Mr. Vance," Nellie had said, her voice dead calm. "When it is weaponized to crush the vulnerable, it ceases to be justice. It becomes a crime." Vance had just smiled, a thin, patronizing line. "It is just business, ma'am." "No, it is theft," she fired back, refusing to let him have the last word. "A woman's labor has value. My sweat built this ranch. My mind kept it from going under. Stripping a person of their property and their dignity simply because society does not require a woman's name on a legal deed is a direct violation of basic human rights. You might have the paper, Mr. Vance, but you do not have the truth, and the truth outlasts paper." Vance's smile had faded. He hadn't liked that. He liked widows who wept. He liked women who begged. Nellie did neither. She had packed a single trunk, walked out the front door, and rode the 40 miles to Crestwood. That was 12 months ago. 12 months of taking in mending. 12 months of washing other people's floors. 12 months of being completely invisible. But Nellie hadn't been crying in the dark. She had been planning. She opened her eyes, bringing herself back to the cramped room in the boarding house. She picked up her pen. Beside her agricultural ledger sat a stack of freshly copied pages. She was duplicating everything, every yield, every profit, every weather pattern. And beside that stack was a clipping from a newspaper. Wife wanted. Practical arrangement. Must be strong, capable of ranch management, and expect no romance. Millhaven Creek, Texas. Address letters to Samuel O'Connor. Samuel O'Connor, the Union veteran from Tennessee. The man who had bought her stolen ranch from Hiram Vance. The man who was currently living in the house she built. Nellie had written to him 2 weeks ago. She didn't tell him who she was. She didn't tell him she knew the floorboards in his kitchen creaked, or that the west pasture needed lime. She just told him she was strong. She told him she knew ledgers. She told him she was exactly what he asked for. A shadow moved beneath the crack of her bedroom door. A moment later, a white envelope slid across the floorboards. Nellie put her pen down. She walked over, picked it up, and tore the seal. The handwriting was blocky, stiff. A man who didn't like wasting ink. Mrs. Preston, I will meet the train on the 14th. The roof is sound, the work is hard. Tell me, do you know anything about handling shorthorn cattle? I aim to expand the herd. S. O'Connor. Nellie stared at the letter. She read the last line twice. Do you know anything about handling shorthorn cattle? A slow, sharp smile touched the corner of her mouth. It didn't reach her eyes. She folded the letter, slipped it into her pocket, and looked out at the rain. Yes, Mr. O'Connor, she thought. I know them. They used to be mine. The rain didn't quit. It came down in sheets, heavy, silver. It turned the dirt streets of Millhaven Creek into thick, sucking mud. Sam O'Connor stood under the leaking overhang of the train depot. He wore a thick leather coat. His hat was pulled low. He didn't talk to the men pacing the platform. He didn't have the patience for it. He was a man who preferred quiet. The war had burned the need for idle chatter right out of him. Tennessee had taken the rest. He pulled out his pocket watch. 2 hours late. Down the tracks, a whistle cut through the storm, a low, mournful howl. The black iron engine dragged itself into the station, hissing steam that immediately died in the freezing rain. The doors opened. A few folks hurried off, rushing toward waiting buggies, and then there she was, Eleanor Preston. She stepped down onto the platform. There was no awning where her car stopped. The rain hit her instantly. It plastered her dark dress to her skin. Her thin wool shawl offered nothing. Her leather travel bag was already soaking through. She stood there, shivering, completely exposed to the storm. Down the platform, 3 local ranch hands leaned against the ticket office. They were dry, they were smoking, and they were laughing. Look at that one of them sneered, loud enough to cut through the rain. Mail order bride, I reckon. Looks like a drowned rat. Hope whoever bought her kept the receipt. They chuckled. It was a cruel, ugly sound. Nellie heard it. She didn't look away, she didn't drop her head. She just stood there, jaw set, water dripping from her eyelashes. Sam heard it too. Something hard shifted in his chest. He didn't think about it. He just moved. He walked out from under the overhang, right into the downpour. He closed the distance between them in long, heavy strides. He didn't say hello. He didn't introduce himself. He stopped in front of her. He took off his heavy leather coat. The wind bit through his flannel shirt immediately, but he ignored it. He draped the thick, warm leather over her shoulders. It was heavy. It smelled like wood smoke and rain. Nellie flinched, surprised. She looked up at him. Sam didn't look at her just yet. He turned on his heel. He looked directly at the 3 men under the awning. His voice was not loud, but it was low, steady. It carried like a rifle shot. You boys think that's funny, Sam said. It wasn't a question. The men stopped laughing. They shifted on their boots. Listen to me, and listen good, Sam said, his voice cutting through the drumming rain. No human being, man or woman, should stand freezing in the rain when they've traveled a hard road to find a home. Basic respect is a human right. It is not a joke for your amusement. You don't mock a person's dignity just because they're wet, tired, and carrying their life in a bag. You treat a woman with the same exact baseline decency you'd demand for yourselves. You understand me? Silence. Only the rain. The men nodded slowly, averting their eyes. Sam turned back to Nellie. He reached down and took her soaked bag. "I'm Sam O'Connor," he said. "Eleanor," she replied. Her teeth were chattering, but her voice was steady. "Wagons this way. Step careful. Mud's slick." That was it. No apologies for the weather, no pity. He saw a problem. He fixed it. He defended her right to stand on that platform without being degraded. Nellie pulled the coat tighter around herself. It was the first time in a year a man had used his voice to protect her, rather than erase her. They walked to the wagon. He helped her up. They drove out of town in silence. The rain hammered the canvas roof. Sam kept his eyes on the road. He counted 47 words spoken the whole trip. He told her about the horses. He told her the names of his 2 ranch hands. He didn't ask her about her past. They pulled up to the ranch just after dark. Nellie looked through the rain. The silhouette of the house rose against the night sky. Her house. Her breath hitched, just for a second. The porch was the same. The roof line was the same. She had driven the nails into those porch steps. "I'll stable the horses," Sam said, breaking her thoughts. "Go on inside. Fire's going. Stew is on the stove." She nodded. She walked up the steps. She pushed open the door. Warmth hit her. It smelled like beef broth and dry pine. She stood in the entryway. She let the heavy coat slip from her shoulders. She looked around. It was different, but it was exactly the same. The old wood stove was gone, replaced by a bigger black iron model. A good choice. But it sat in the exact spot she had chosen 9 years ago. The table was new. The chairs were different. But the window still looked out over the west pasture. She walked into the kitchen. She ladled some stew into a bowl. She stood by the window, eating in the dark. 15 minutes later, the back door opened. Sam walked in. He hung up his hat. He poured a cup of coffee. He saw her standing by the window. He walked over. He stood a few feet away. He looked out into the dark, too. "That west corner," Sam said, his voice quiet. "Soil is bad. Couldn't figure it out the first year. Took me 2 seasons to realize it needed lime powder." Nellie stopped chewing. She looked out the window. She knew it needed lime. She had written it in her ledger. "Needs lime. Never forget." "Did the previous owner leave any notes?" Nellie asked. Her voice was perfectly calm, like she was asking about the weather. Sam took a sip of his coffee. He shook his head. "Nothing. Bank handled the sale. Old owner died in debt. Widow took her share and moved on. Clean break. A clean break." Nellie looked at the coffee cup in his hand. She felt the lie settle in the room. He believed it. He truly believed it. Hiram Vance had sold him a stolen house, and Sam had bought it fair and square. "I'll look at the books tomorrow," Nellie said. Sam nodded. "All right." He turned to leave the kitchen. He stopped in the doorway. He looked back at her. She was still standing there, wet, tired, but her spine was straight as a plumb line. Sam had been married before, in Tennessee. A delicate woman. A woman who listened to the whispers of his family over the truth in his heart. When things got hard, she left. He hadn't fought for her. He hadn't spoken up. He let the silence win. He learned a hard lesson about what happens when you don't use your voice. He didn't know this Eleanor yet. He didn't know what brought her here. But he knew one thing. She wasn't delicate. "Get some sleep," Sam said. "I will," she replied. He walked down the hall. Nellie turned back to the window. She placed her hand flat against the cold glass. He doesn't know, she thought, but he will. The routine came back like muscle memory. 3 weeks passed. Nellie didn't talk about Virginia. She didn't talk about her late husband. She just worked. 4 o'clock in the morning. The floorboards were freezing. She didn't care. She swung her legs out of bed. She walked down the hall in the dark. She knew exactly which board squeaked outside the parlor. She stepped over it. She checked the fireplace. The flue was still slightly tilted. A bad wind in 72 had knocked it askew. Sam hadn't noticed it yet. She fixed the damper. 5 o'clock. She cooked breakfast, bacon, biscuits, coffee strong enough to float a horseshoe. But she wasn't just cooking. She was inventorying. Flour was running low. The salt pork was curing wrong. She made a mental list. She would put it in her own ledger later. 6 o'clock. She stepped out onto the porch. The sun was just breaking over the ridge. Sam was already at the barn with the two hands, Elias and Jimmy. Nellie walked down. She stood by the fence. She listened. Jimmy was a young kid. He was reporting on the herd. He was missing things. He wasn't looking at their eyes. He wasn't checking their gait. Nellie saw it. She didn't correct him in front of Sam. That wasn't her place yet. Noon. The sun was high. Sam was out in the far pasture mending wire. Nellie was in the barn. She heard the sound, a wet, rattling cough. She walked down the row of stalls. A new shorthorn calf was down in the straw, sides heaving, eyes rolling back, lung fever. Nellie didn't panic. She didn't run to find the men. She walked to the tack room. She found the camphor. She found the mustard powder. She mixed the poultice exactly the way she had in 1873. She knelt in the dirt. She rubbed it into the calf's chest. She wrapped it in a warm burlap sack. She sat with it for 2 hours. When Sam rode back into the yard, he went straight to the barn. He stopped at the stall. He looked at the calf. It was breathing easy, sleeping. He looked at Nellie. She was wiping her hands on a rag. "You know shorthorns," Sam said. "A little," she replied. He looked at the poultice. He looked at her hands. He knew a dying calf when he saw one. He knew she had just saved him $20. He didn't ask where she learned it. He just tipped his hat. Obliged. She nodded. She walked back to the house. She had 11 more calves to check. By the 3rd week, Nellie needed supplies. She hitched the small wagon and drove into Millhaven Creek. She kept her hat pulled low. She didn't want to see Martha Higgins at the general store. She didn't want to see Hiram Vance walking out of the bank. She stopped the wagon at the end of town, down by the creek. A small wooden wash house stood near the water. Steam poured out the open door. The smell of lye soap and boiling linen filled the air. Beatrice Jackson stood over a copper wash pot. She was stirring it with a heavy wooden paddle. She was 67 years old. A free black woman who had been in this town longer than the mayor, longer than the bank. Nellie stopped at the door. Bea didn't look up immediately. She kept stirring. Then she stopped. She rested the paddle on the rim. She looked at the woman in the doorway. No surprise, no shock, just a slow, deep nod. "Heard Sam O'Connor brought a wife in on the train," Bea said. Her voice was like crushed gravel, deep, rich. "Figured it was you." "You knew I'd come back, Bea?" Nellie asked quietly. "A woman don't build a house with her bare hands just to let a thief lock the door on her," Bea said. She wiped her hands on her apron. "Come in, shut the door." Nellie stepped inside. The heat was heavy. It felt like a blanket. They sat on 2 wooden stools near the fire. "Vance didn't burn the paper," Bea said, getting right to it. "The original note, the one with the signature, he kept it. It's in the iron safe at the courthouse." Nellie felt her heart kick against her ribs. "You're sure?" "I wash the courthouse linens. I wash the judge's shirts. I hear things," Bea said. She looked Nellie dead in the eye. "People talk around me like I'm a ghost. Like I ain't in the room. They think because my skin is dark and I wash their dirt, I ain't got a brain in my head." Bea leaned forward. Her eyes were sharp, fierce. "Listen to me, Nellie," Bea said, her voice dropping to a powerful whisper. "History in this town is written by the men who can afford ink. Men like Hiram Vance. They write the laws, they sign the deeds. But the foundation of this town, it was built on our sweat. Your sweat in that dirt. My sweat over this boiling pot." Bea reached out and tapped the wooden table with a scarred finger. Equality ain't something they're going to hand us on a silver platter, B said, making sure every word landed. Human rights begin the exact moment we refuse to be erased from the story. They think you are invisible because you're a woman. They think I'm invisible because of my color. We have to speak. We have to demand our place. If you let them take your land without a fight, you're telling them that a woman's labor is worth nothing. You have to prove them wrong. Out loud. Nellie swallowed hard. The truth of B's words hit her like a physical blow. I need to get into that safe, Nellie said. You can't break in, B warned. You need the law to open it for you. An audit, Nellie breathed. Yes, B nodded. An audit. Nellie drove back to the ranch. The sun was going down. The sky was the color of a bruised plum. She felt the weight of it all. It was heavy. Too heavy. That night the house was quiet. Sam was asleep. Or she thought he was. Nellie sat at the kitchen table. The oil lamp was turned down low. She had her ledger open. She had her pen in her hand. She looked at the numbers. She looked at the plan. Request audit. Prove Thomas died before June. Prove signature is fake. Evict Sam. She stopped. She looked at the last part. Evict Sam. Sam O'Connor wasn't a bad man. He had covered her with his coat. He had defended her in front of strangers. He treated his men fair. He treated her with respect. If she won, he lost everything. He had paid Vance real money for this farm. She rubbed her eyes. Her head ached. The math didn't add up to justice for everyone. It was a messy, brutal equation. She sat there in the quiet, the pen trembling slightly in her grip. Down the dark hallway, Sam stood in the shadows. He couldn't sleep. He had come out for a drink of water. He stopped when he saw the light under the kitchen door. He looked through the crack near the hinge. He saw Nellie. He saw the ledger. He saw the intense, desperate focus on her face. She wasn't crying. She wasn't knitting. She was calculating. She looked like a general planning a siege. Sam didn't go in. He didn't ask what she was doing. He watched her for a long time. He realized then that Eleanor Preston was carrying a burden bigger than a travel bag. She was fighting a war he couldn't see. He backed away quietly. He went back to his room. The next morning, Nellie woke at her usual time. She walked into the kitchen. There was a piece of paper sitting on top of her ledger. She picked it up. It was in Sam's blocky handwriting. That west corner. I read an article last year in a farming gazette. Said to use crushed limestone to fix the acid in the soil. Author just signed it, a farm, Texas. Worked perfectly. Wondering if you ever read it. Nellie stared at the note. A farm. Ashworth Farm. No, Preston Farm. She had used an alias to get it published, because no paper would print an agricultural thesis written by a woman. Sam was learning how to run her farm by reading her own words. She folded the note. She put it in her pocket. The war wasn't invisible anymore. The lines were drawing themselves. Nellie wore her best dress to town. It wasn't silk, it wasn't new. It was dark blue cotton, faded at the hems, but it was clean and pressed sharp enough to cut wood. She pinned her hair back tight, no loose strands, no room for anyone to think she was unraveling. She walked into the Crestwood County Courthouse at 10 in the morning. The building smelled like old paper, stale cigar smoke, and men who held too much power. She walked past the spittoons, past the benches where lawyers whispered in ears. She walked straight to the clerk's desk. The clerk didn't look up. He was tallying a ledger. I need to file a formal request, Nellie said. Her voice was level. He finally looked up. He took in her faded dress. What kind of request, ma'am? Marriage license? Birth registry? A public county audit. The clerk stopped moving. He put his pen down. An audit. On what property? Section 4, Millhaven Creek, the O'Connor Ranch. Formerly the Preston Ranch. The clerk let out a dry, dismissive laugh. Ma'am, you can't just walk in here and demand an audit on a man's land. You have to be a citizen with a vested legal interest. You have to have your name on a deed, or a banknote. Nellie didn't blink. She reached into her leather bag. She pulled out a folded, heavy piece of parchment. She slid it across the wooden counter. "That is a certificate of marriage," Nellie said, "dated 1868, between myself and Thomas Preston. Under Texas property law, a legally wedded wife has a vested interest in the estate of her deceased husband. I am a citizen. I have a vested interest, and I am invoking my right to a public audit of those land records." The clerk looked at the paper. He looked at the seal. He looked back at her. The smirk was gone. "I'll file it," he muttered. Nellie walked out into the sunlight. Her hands were shaking. Just a little. She pressed them flat against her skirt until they stopped. By 3 o'clock, Hiram Vance knew. A town like Millhaven Creek didn't have secrets. It had a telegraph of whispers, and Vance owned the wires. He didn't wait. He didn't come to the ranch. He waited for the monthly town hall meeting that evening. The meeting was held in the schoolhouse. It was packed, hot. The air was thick with the smell of kerosene and damp wool. Sam O'Connor sat in the third row. Nellie sat beside him. They didn't touch, they barely spoke. The mayor went through the usual business: road repairs, fences, a dispute over a stray calf. Then Hiram Vance stood up. He wore his gray wool suit. He held his hat in his hands. He looked like the picture of civic concern. "Before we adjourn," Vance said, his voice carrying perfectly to the back of the room, "I feel it is my duty to address a matter of public safety. We have a newcomer among us, a woman who arrived on the train just weeks ago, claiming to be a mail-order bride for our good neighbor, Mr. O'Connor." He paused, let the room lean in. "I have learned today that this woman has filed legal motions to audit property records in this county. She is attempting to stir up frivolous, costly legal trouble, to lay claim to things that are not hers. It breaks my heart to see a decent man like Sam taken in by a grifter, but a town has a right to protect itself." The room erupted into mutters. Heads turned, eyes locked on Nellie. 4 rows up, Martha Higgins, the woman who had helped Nellie sew her mourning dress when Thomas died, turned around. Martha's eyes were cold, hard. She looked at Nellie like she was a stranger, like she was dirt. Nellie felt the heat rise in her throat. Sam sat next to her. He was staring straight ahead. His jaw was tight. His hands were curled into fists on his knees. He didn't stand up. He didn't say a word. Nellie didn't wait for him. She stood up. Her chair scraped loud against the wooden floor. The muttering stopped. The room went dead silent. She looked directly at Hiram Vance. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. "Mr. Vance calls an audit a frivolous legal trouble," Nellie said. Her words were measured, sharp. "He calls transparency a danger to the town." She turned slightly, addressing the crowded room. She looked at the faces of the people she had known for nearly a decade. "Transparency and access to public records are not privileges granted by the wealthy," Nellie said, speaking clearly so every man and woman heard her. "They are fundamental civic rights that belong to every person in this room. An honest man does not fear an open book. An honest bank does not hide its ledgers in the dark. The law allows any citizen to verify the truth of a land deal. If Mr. Vance's paperwork is clean, an audit will only prove him right. If you let a man convince you that asking to see the truth is a crime, then you have already surrendered your freedom to him." She held the room's gaze. No one spoke. "I am simply using my rights as a citizen," Nellie finished, "and I will not be shamed for it." She sat down. The silence hung heavy, thick. It wasn't the silence of people agreeing with her. It was the silence of fear. They were afraid of Vance. And now they were afraid of her. The mayor quickly banged his gavel. Meeting adjourned. The ride back to the ranch was brutal. The wagon wheels ground against the dirt. The crickets screamed in the tall grass. The moon was a sliver of bone in the black sky. Sam held the reins. He looked straight ahead. Nellie sat beside him. The space between them on the buckboard felt like a canyon. "You didn't say anything," Nellie said. Her voice was quiet, flat. Sam kept his eyes on the horses. "It wasn't my fight. It was your name he used. He called me a grifter who took you in. He used your reputation to tear mine down. I don't care what they think about me." "But I care what they think about me," Nellie shot back. The crack in her voice finally showed. "Because reputation is all a woman has to trade on in this world. When you stayed silent in that room, Sam, you didn't stay neutral. You picked a side. Silence always picks the side of the man with the power." Sam pulled the reins. The wagon slowed. He looked at her. The moonlight caught the deep lines around his eyes. He looked tired. He looked haunted. "I bought this land fair, Eleanor," he said. It was a plea, a desperate one. "I paid cash money. I got a deed. I don't want trouble." "Trouble was here before I stepped off that train," she said softly. "You just couldn't see it." They didn't speak the rest of the way. When they got back to the house, Sam went straight to the barn. Nellie went into the kitchen. She didn't light the lamp. She sat at the table in the dark. She had made her move. Vance had countered. The town was turning on her. And Sam was paralyzing himself with his own fear of conflict. She needed more than a marriage certificate. A marriage certificate got the door open. To win, she had to prove the house was stolen. She needed Thomas's death certificate. And she needed the original forged note. She sat in the dark and rebuilt her plan. Piece by piece, brick by brick. She would not lose this house a second time. Sam couldn't sleep. He lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling. The shadows played tricks in the moonlight. He kept hearing Nellie's voice in his head. Silence always picks the side of the man with the power. He threw off the quilt. The floor was cold. He pulled on his trousers and walked barefoot down the hall. He didn't go to the kitchen. He went to the small room he used as an office. He lit a single candle on the desk. He pulled the heavy iron key from his pocket and unlocked the bottom drawer of his desk. He took out the thick manila folder holding all the paperwork for the ranch. He laid it out on the wood, the deed, the bill of sale, the bank transfer receipts. Everything looked clean, everything looked legal. Hiram Vance had handed him this folder and smiled a warm, welcoming smile. Sam flipped past the deed. He dug deeper. He found the county surveyor's report. He had glanced at it 2 years ago. Just a formality, ensuring the property lines met the creek. He brought the candle closer. He read the fine print at the bottom of the page. Survey conducted July 12, 1875. Notes. Boundary lines confirmed. Property owner Nellie Preston, widow, refused survey signature. Dismissed. Sam stopped breathing for a second. Widow. He looked at the date again. July 1875. He rummaged through the folder. He found the copy of the bank's promissory note. The one Vance claimed Thomas Preston had signed to put the farm up for collateral. Dated August 14th, 1875. Sam stared at the 2 pieces of paper side by side. If Nellie was a widow in July, Thomas couldn't have signed a banknote in August. Dead men don't sign for loans. The paper in Sam's hand started to shake. He was a fair man. He prided himself on it. He paid his debts. He kept his word. But the math on this desk told a story he didn't want to hear. It told him he had handed his life savings to a thief. It told him he was sleeping under a stolen roof. The next morning, the tension in the house was thick enough to cut with a hunting knife. Breakfast was quiet. Just the clink of forks on tin plates. After Sam came in from the morning chores, he found Nellie sitting at the kitchen table. She had the ranch ledgers open. Not her secret ones. The official ones Sam kept. He walked over. He looked over her shoulder. There was red ink everywhere. "What are you doing to my books?" he asked. His voice was tight. "I'm fixing them," Nellie said. She didn't look up. She kept her pen moving. "You're bleeding money on winter feed. You're buying grain from Higgins at a 20% markup because you wait until November to order it." Sam crossed his arms. "Higgins gives me a fair price." "Higgins gives you the price Vance tells him to," she countered, finally looking up. "Vance holds Higgins' mortgage. If Vance wants to squeeze a rancher, he tells Higgins to raise the grain prices. You're paying a tax for staying out of town politics." Sam frowned. He pulled out a chair and sat down. He looked at the numbers. Here, Nellie said, pointing to a column. If you switch the herd to rotational grazing, move them between the east and west pastures every 14 days, instead of letting them run open, the grass recovers. You won't need to buy supplemental grain until January. Your profit margin on the spring sale goes up 18%. Sam looked at the ledger. The math was flawless. It was brilliant. It was exactly what the ranch needed. Where did you learn to figure like this? He asked. I didn't learn it. I built it, she said flatly. I ran this place for 9 years, Sam. I know what the soil can take. I know what the herd needs. Sam looked at her. Really looked at her. He didn't see a mail-order bride. He didn't see a fragile widow. He saw a partner, an equal, a woman whose mind was sharper than any man he had ever served with in the cavalry. 18%, he murmured. If we move the fences, she said. We. The word hung in the air between them. Sam slowly nodded. We'll move the wire tomorrow. While they were talking about fences 5 miles away, Hiram Vance was talking about ruin. Vance stood in the back room of the general store. The smell of pickled eggs and leather saddles filled the cramped space. Martha Higgins stood behind her desk. Her hands were trembling. Her husband was out back, unloading a wagon. You saw the meeting, Martha, Vance said. He was inspecting a silver pocket watch, not looking at her. The Preston woman is causing trouble. Sam O'Connor is letting her. I turned my back on her, Martha whispered. Just like you asked. Turning your back isn't enough, Vance snapped the watch shut. He looked up. His eyes were dead black. I want the O'Connor ranch isolated. Complete quarantine. You don't sell them feed. You don't sell them seed. You don't buy their beef. If Sam O'Connor's men come in here for a pound of coffee, you tell them the store is closed. Mr. Vance, I can't do that, Martha pleaded. Sam pays in cash. He's a good customer. I hold the note on this store, Martha, Vance said. His voice dropped to a terrifying purr. The balloon payment is due in 6 weeks. If you do business with that ranch, I will call the note in early. You and your husband will be sleeping in the dirt by Sunday. Martha swallowed a sob. She nodded her head. Good girl, Vance smiled. He tipped his hat and walked out the back door. Back at the ranch, the afternoon heat was oppressive. Sam had gone back out to check the fence lines. Nellie stayed in the house. She needed to clean the small office. Sam had left the drawers unlocked after his late-night pacing. She walked in with a dust rag. She saw the manila folder sitting out on the desk. She froze. She shouldn't look. She was walking a fine line. But the need for evidence was a physical ache in her chest. She reached out and opened the folder. She saw the deed. She saw the surveyor's note. Sam had been looking at the dates. He knew. She flipped the page. She moved a stack of old feed receipts. At the bottom of the pile, stuck to the back of an old envelope, was a folded piece of paper. It looked older than the rest. The edges were yellowed. Nellie picked it up. She recognized the handwriting instantly. Thomas. Her breath caught. She unfolded the paper carefully. It was a letter. Dated March 1875, a month before he died. It was addressed to his brother in Ohio. It had never been mailed. She read the words. Her eyes flew across the page. Cough is getting worse. Nellie worries, but she is strong. Hiram Vance rode out yesterday. Offered me a loan against the house to pay for a doctor from Austin. I threw him off my porch. I told him I would rather die choking on my own blood than put my wife's home in the hands of a banker. I will never sign a paper with that man. Nellie's knees went weak. She caught the edge of the desk to keep from falling. Proof. She had it. Not just a mismatched date. Not just her word against Vance's. She had Thomas's own hand, clearly stating he refused the loan. Vance had kept the file together, probably thinking an unmailed letter from a dead man meant nothing. Or he had never read it at all. She folded the letter. She slipped it down the front of her dress, pressing it against her heart. It beat like a drum against the paper. The storm wasn't coming anymore. The storm was here. The trouble didn't ride in on a dark horse. It came in the back of a grain wagon. Jimmy, the young ranch hand, drove the wagon into the yard just before noon. The bed was empty, no burlap sacks of oats, no winter wheat. Sam walked out of the barn. He wiped grease from his hands with a rag. He looked at the empty wagon. He looked at Jimmy. The kid's face was red. His jaw was tight. "Store's closed, boss," Jimmy said. He wouldn't look Sam in the eye. Sam stopped wiping his hands. "It's Tuesday. Martha Higgins never closes on a Tuesday." "She didn't close the store, Mr. O'Connor. She closed it to us." Jimmy swallowed hard. "Said her husband ain't doing business with the Preston Ranch no more. Said it was bad for their credit. Folks on the porch just stared at me. Nobody said a word." Sam threw the rag onto a barrel. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. He just nodded. The silence he had kept in the town hall was coming back to collect its debt. Vance was drawing a line in the dirt, and he was starving Sam out to make his point. An hour later, the dust kicked up on the main road. A single rider. It was Deputy Miller, a man who wore a tin star but took his orders from the bank. Miller rode into the yard. He didn't dismount. He looked down at Sam. "Afternoon, Sam," Miller said. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a folded legal document. He held it out. Sam didn't take it. "What's that, Miller?" "Civil suit," Miller said, his voice flat. "Mr. Vance is filing charges. Fraud, slander, malicious disruption of county commerce. He's naming your mail-order bride, and he's naming you for harboring her." Sam stared at the paper. The wind kicked up a swirl of dust around his boots. "Now," Miller said, leaning forward on the saddle horn. "Mr. Vance is a reasonable man. He knows you got taken in. A pretty face, a sad story. It happens to the best of us. He sent me with an affidavit, too." Miller tapped his coat pocket. "You sign the paper," Miller said softly. "You state for the record that you disavow the woman's actions. You throw her out. The suit goes away. The grain store opens back up. Your ranch survives. Clean break." Sam looked at the deputy. He thought about his land. He thought about the empty wagon. Then he thought about the soaking wet woman on the train platform. He thought about the way she looked at a ledger, the way she saved a dying calf with her bare hands. "I don't sign away people, Miller," Sam said. His voice was like grinding stone. "Take your paper back to Vance. Tell him if he wants a fight, he can ride out here and bring it himself." Miller shook his head. "You're making a mistake, Sam. She ain't worth losing your land over." "Get off my property," Sam said. Miller turned his horse and rode out. Inside the house, Nellie watched from the kitchen window. She had heard enough. Vance was moving fast, faster than she anticipated. He was trying to crush Sam before the audit could happen. She couldn't wait for the county bureaucracy to grind its slow wheels. She had to strike now, outside of Vance's jurisdiction. She went to her room. She took the copied ledgers. She took Thomas's unsent letter. She wrapped them in oilcloth. She saddled the roan mare herself. Sam was out in the far pasture fixing wire. She didn't leave a note. She rode hard for 2 hours, crossing the county line into Bayard County. She pulled up in front of a small, dusty office. The sign above the door read, "Harold Fitch, Attorney at Law." Fitch was a poor lawyer. His suits were frayed at the cuffs. But he didn't owe Hiram Vance a dime. That made him the most powerful man she knew. Nellie walked in. She dropped the oilcloth bundle on his desk. Fitch looked up from his coffee. "I need to petition a judge," Nellie said. "Not a Millhaven judge, Judge Wallace. I know he holds circuit court here on Wednesdays." Fitch opened the bundle. He read Thomas's letter. He looked at the ledgers. He whistled low through his teeth. "This is a forged banknote, Mrs. Preston," Fitch said. "A serious charge against a powerful man. The letter is good, but Vance's lawyers will argue your husband wrote it in a fever state, or that you forged it yourself. We need a living witness, someone who can testify to Vance's movements and the existence of that original note in his safe." "I have one," Nellie said. "Beatrice Jackson, the laundress in Millhaven." Fitch paused. He set the papers down. He rubbed his eyes. "A black woman," Fitch said quietly, "in a Texas courtroom, testifying against a wealthy white banker." Mrs. Preston, I want to win this for you. But you put her on the stand. Vance's lawyers will tear her apart. They will tell the judge her word means nothing. They will dismiss her before she even opens her mouth. Nellie slammed her hands flat on Fitch's desk. The coffee cups rattled. Listen to me, Mr. Fitch, Nellie said. Her voice shook with a sudden fierce anger. A person's word is not weighed by the color of their skin. It is weighed by the truth in their chest. Fitch blinked, taken aback by her fire. B was in that town before any of us, Nellie continued, refusing to back down. She has seen every lie Hiram Vance ever told. If we hide her away because it is easier, we are no better than the men who steal our land. Dismissing her testimony is trampling on true justice. If the law requires us to silence the truth because of prejudice, then we break that law and build a new one. We will use her voice, because her voice is the truth. Fitch looked at the fierce, unyielding woman standing in his office. He slowly picked up his pen. All right, Fitch said. We use her. I'll get Judge Wallace. We file the injunction tomorrow morning. It was dark by the time Nellie rode back into the ranch yard. The wind had picked up. It howled through the eaves of the barn. Sam was waiting on the porch. The orange glow of his cigarette was the only light in the dark. He walked down the steps as she dismounted. He took the reins from her hands. You went to Bayard, Sam said. He didn't ask. He knew the tracks. I did, Nellie said. She didn't flinch. Miller rode out here today. Vance filed a suit. He tried to get me to sign a paper throwing you out. Nellie felt her chest tighten. Did you sign it? Sam looked at her. His eyes were dark in the shadows. No, he said. I didn't. He tied the horse to the post. He turned back to her. But I am done living in the dark, Eleanor, Sam said. His voice was heavy. A man pushed to his absolute limit. I didn't sign the paper, but you are going to walk into that kitchen, and you are going to tell me exactly what is going on. Every word, no more shadows, or I will pack my bags and ride out tonight. Nellie looked at him. He had stood his ground. For her. She nodded. Come inside. The kitchen was quiet. The oil lamp cast long, flickering shadows against the walls. Sam sat on one side of the heavy oak table. Nellie sat on the other. She didn't cry. She didn't seek pity. She just laid it out like a ledger. Cold, hard numbers. Cold, hard facts. I came here in '69, Nellie said. Her hands were folded on the table. Thomas and I built this house. I dug the well. I bred the cattle. When Thomas died in '75, the land was clear. We owed nothing. Sam listened. He didn't interrupt. Hiram Vance showed up 2 years later with a piece of paper, she continued. A promissory note. Said Thomas took a loan right before he passed. It was a lie. The signature was a forgery. But I was a widow alone on a ranch. He had deputies, he had the judge. I had nothing but the clothes on my back. She looked down at her hands. The calluses were still there. I answered your ad because it was the only way back through the door, she said, finally looking up to meet his eyes. I needed to get back on this land to find the proof. I used you, Sam. I admit that. Sam's jaw worked. He looked at the grain of the wood table. Why fight this hard? Sam asked quietly. You could have started over somewhere else. Anywhere else. Nellie sat up straighter. The fire in her eyes flared in the lamplight. Because I'm fighting for the right to own my own labor, Nellie said, her voice ringing with absolute conviction. Every fence post out there, every drop of water in that trench, it is mine. Equality does not exist if the law only serves as a shield for the wealthy. If a man can take my life's work just because the law doesn't respect a woman's name on a piece of paper, then I am nothing but property myself. I will not be erased, Sam. I demand my dignity back. Sam stared at her. He saw the sheer, undeniable force of her spirit. He reached into his shirt pocket. He pulled out a piece of paper. He slid it across the table. Nellie looked down. It was a copy of Thomas's death certificate. "I found the surveyor's notes from July," Sam said, his voice low and steady. "It called you a widow. The banknote Vance showed me was dated August. Dead men don't sign for loans." Nellie looked at the paper. Then she looked at him. "You knew," she whispered. "I figured it out," Sam corrected. "I know I bought a stolen farm. I know my money funded a thief." He took a deep breath. "I ran from a fight once, in Tennessee. I let loud people tell me what the truth was. I lost my family because of it. I'm not running this time." He reached across the table. He didn't take her hand, but he rested his fingertips near hers. "You aren't fighting alone anymore, Eleanor." 2 days later, the Crestwood County Courthouse. The room was packed to the rafters. The air was stifling. Men stood shoulder to shoulder in the back. Martha Higgins sat in the second row, clutching her purse. Hiram Vance sat at the defendant's table. He looked annoyed, like a man swatting a mosquito. But the man sitting behind the elevated bench wasn't the local Millhaven judge. It was Judge Wallace from Bayard County. Fitch had secured the injunction. The jurisdiction had been pulled. Wallace banged his gavel. The heavy crack silenced the room. "This is a public audit of the property records for Section 4, Millhaven Creek," Judge Wallace boomed. "Brought forth by Eleanor Preston, widow of the original claimant. Mr. Fitch, proceed." Fitch stood up. His cheap suit hung loose, but his spine was steel. He didn't waste time. He presented the dates. He presented Thomas's unsent letter. He called a handwriting expert from Austin who testified for 20 minutes that the signature on Vance's promissory note was a textbook forgery. Vance's lawyer, a slick man from Dallas, objected wildly. "Speculation. A letter never mailed is no proof. The widow could have penned it herself to steal the land from the rightful owner." The crowd murmured. Doubt crept back into the room. Fitch waited for the noise to die down. He looked at Nellie. She nodded. "Your Honor," Fitch said, his voice carrying clearly, "I call my final witness, Miss Beatrice Jackson." The room went dead silent. Then a wave of shocked whispers broke out. From the back of the room, the heavy oak doors opened. Bea walked in. She wore a clean, starched gray dress. She held her head high. She walked down the center aisle. She didn't look at the angry faces of the men. She didn't look at Vance. She looked straight at the judge. Vance shot out of his chair. His face was purple. "Objection!" Vance roared, losing his polished composure. "This is an outrage. This woman is a laundress. She is not a legal party. Furthermore, the court cannot seriously entertain the testimony of a colored woman in a matter of high finance and property." Judge Wallace narrowed his eyes. He looked ready to entertain the objection. It was 1878. The law was written by men who looked like Vance. Before the judge could speak, Nellie stood up. She stepped out from behind the table. She looked directly at Vance, and then up at the judge. "Your Honor," Nellie said, her voice cutting through the tension like a whip, "the law is blind, or it is broken. You cannot dismiss a witness based on the color of her skin or the dirt on her apron. Truth has no race. Truth has no gender." She gestured to Bea, who stood tall at the witness stand. "This woman washes the dirt out of this town's clothes," Nellie stated boldly. "She hears the truth when men like Mr. Vance think no one of importance is listening. Justice demands we listen to the marginalized because they are the ones who witness the crimes of the powerful. Let her speak." Judge Wallace stared at Nellie. He looked at the packed courtroom. He banged his gavel. "Objection overruled," Wallace grunted. "The witness will speak." Vance slowly sank back into his chair. For the first time, he looked pale. Bea placed her hand on the Bible. She swore the oath. Her voice was deep, resonant, and entirely unafraid. "Mr. Vance came to my wash house in August of '75, Bea testified. He had a man with him, a man who forged signatures for a living in Austin. I heard them talking while I boiled the linens. Mr. Vance said, 'Make the P look heavier.' Thomas Preston wrote with a heavy hand. I saw him slide the money across my washing table to pay for the crime." The courtroom erupted. Men shouted. Martha Higgins gasped. a hand flying to her mouth. Vance's lawyer tried to shout over the noise, but it was useless. The dam had broken. The truth was out, spoken by the very woman Vance had deemed too invisible to matter. Sam sat in the front row. He looked at Nellie. She was standing tall, watching the gavel come down again and again. She hadn't just reclaimed her land. She had dragged the whole town into the light. The dust settled, but the quiet that followed wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. 2 days had passed since the gavel fell in Crestwood. Hiram Vance was sitting in a county jail cell waiting on a grand jury. The bank was locked. The town of Millhaven Creek was walking around like a dog that had just been kicked. They didn't know where to look. They sure didn't look at the O'Connor ranch. Sam didn't ask Nellie to cook. He didn't ask her to clean. He stayed out of the house. He worked the fences. He chopped wood until his hands blistered. Nellie stayed in the garden. She pulled weeds that didn't need pulling. She felt the Texas sun beat down on her neck. She had won the battle in the courtroom, but her chest still felt tight. The paper wasn't signed yet. The judge had frozen the deed, but the final ruling was weeks away. On Wednesday morning, Sam saddled his gelding and rode into town. He didn't say where he was going. He came back just past noon. Nellie was on her knees in the dirt, tying up tomato vines. She heard the horse stop near the fence. She didn't look up immediately. She tied the last knot. Then she stood, wiping her hands on her coarse canvas apron. Sam unlatched the gate. He walked into the garden. He didn't take off his hat to block the sun. He just stood there, looking at her. He reached into his shirt pocket. He pulled out a folded piece of heavy legal paper with a red wax seal broken at the lip. He held it out to her. Nellie looked at his hand, calloused, bruised at the knuckles. She took the paper. She unfolded it. It was a legal motion, filed that very morning with Harold Fitch, stamped by the county clerk. I, Samuel O'Connor, do hereby voluntarily surrender 50% of all administrative and financial rights regarding the property known as Section 4, Millhaven Creek, to Eleanor Preston, effective immediately, pending the final criminal resolution of the Vance estate. Nellie stopped breathing for a second. She read the words again. She looked at the signature at the bottom. Sam's blocky, stiff handwriting. "You didn't have to do this," Nellie said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "The court hasn't ordered anything yet. Legally, you hold the high ground until the trial ends. If Vance wriggles out of it on a technicality, you just gave away half your land." "It's not my land," Sam said. His voice was steady, absolutely certain. "Not all of it. I bought it, but you built it. I won't hold the keys to a house that was stolen from the woman standing in front of me. I won't be that kind of man." Nellie looked at the paper. Most women would have cried. Most women would have fallen into his arms. Nellie folded the paper carefully. She slipped it into the deep pocket of her apron. "Thank you," she said. She didn't move toward him. She stood her ground among the tomato vines. Sam looked at the distance between them. He understood it. He respected it. "I owe you more than a piece of paper, Eleanor," Sam said softly. "I know that." "Yes, you do," Nellie said. She looked him dead in the eye. No flinching. No softening the blow. "You gave me half the rights to this farm today, Sam. But rights on paper aren't enough if the man standing beside me won't defend them out loud." She stepped closer to him. The scent of sun-baked earth and crushed green leaves hung between them. "When we were in that town hall," Nellie said, her words deliberate and clear, "when Hiram Vance stood up and called me a grifter, you looked at the floor. You chose to stay quiet. I need you to understand what that silence means." Sam didn't look away. He took the hit. "I need a partner who speaks up," Nellie said, her voice ringing with a fierce, unwavering dignity. "When you stayed silent in that room, you gave permission to the cruelty. You let them believe it was acceptable to tear me down. True love and respect mean never letting your partner's dignity be trampled in broad daylight. If you love someone, you do not let the world erase them while you stand by and watch. You use your voice, because silence is just an agreement with the man holding the whip." Sam closed his eyes for a fraction of a second. The words cut deep. They cut deep because they were entirely true. I learned to be quiet a long time ago, Sam said. His voice was thick, rough. I came back from the war. Tennessee was broken. My family was broken. I married a woman who couldn't handle the dirt. My family talked about her, behind her back, then to her face. They said she was weak. They said she didn't belong. He took a slow, jagged breath. I didn't speak up for her, Sam confessed. The shame was a physical weight on his shoulders. I thought if I just kept my head down, the storm would pass. It didn't pass, it broke her. She packed her bags and left. And she was right to do it. I let them run her off because I was too much of a coward to stand up to my own blood. He looked at Nellie. His eyes were entirely bare. When Vance started talking at that meeting, I felt that same old fear, Sam said. I thought if I stayed quiet, I could keep the ranch safe. I was wrong. A ranch isn't a home if you have to sell your spine to keep it. He took a step toward her, just one. I will never be silent when it comes to you again, Eleanor. I swear it to God and the dirt under my boots. You are my equal. In this dirt, in this house, and in this town. If they want to talk about you, they will have to come through me. Nellie looked at him. She saw the ghost of the man he used to be fading out in the harsh Texas sun. She saw the man he was choosing to become. She reached into her pocket. She touched the folded piece of paper. "All right, Sam," she said softly. "All right." That afternoon, they worked the west pasture together. They didn't work like a boss and a hired hand. They worked like two sides of a rusted hinge, finely oiled and swinging true. They drove the shorthorns toward the creek. Sam rode the perimeter. Nellie guided the calves. When the sun started to dip low, painting the sky in bruised purples and burnt orange, they met at the barn. They unsaddled the horses in comfortable silence, the rhythmic brush of the curry comb against horsehair, the smell of sweet hay. Sam walked over to his saddlebag. He dug into the leather pouch. He pulled out a heavy, dark iron key. He walked over to Nellie. He held it out. "The safe in the office," Sam said. "It's yours. Everything in it is yours. You don't ask to look at the ledgers anymore. You just look." Nellie looked at the key resting in his broad, calloused palm. She reached out and took it. Her fingers brushed his. Warm, solid. She didn't put the key in her pocket. She held it tight in her fist. "We need to check the south fence line tomorrow," she said, looking up at him. The wire was looking slack near the ridge. Sam's mouth hitched at the corner, a real smile. Small, but there. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "We'll check it together." The verdict came down in late August. The heat was oppressive, shimmering in waves off the prairie grass. But the news out of Bayard County blew through Millhaven Creek like a cold, bracing wind. Hiram Vance was indicted on 3 counts of fraud and forgery. The bank was placed in receivership. Judge Wallace didn't just handle the criminal trial, he handled the property dispute. The ruling was practical. It was Texas law, stripped of its usual prejudice. Because Sam O'Connor had purchased the ranch in good faith with his own hard-earned money, the court could not legally strip him of the land entirely. But because the original deed transfer was fraudulent, Nellie Preston was the rightful heir. The judge ruled a permanent, legally binding 50-50 split of the estate. Nellie stood in Harold Fitch's dusty office the day the new deed arrived. She looked at the thick parchment. Property owners, Samuel J. O'Connor and Eleanor M. Preston. Her name, written in black ink, undeniable, unerasable. Fitch handed her a pen. "Sign at the bottom, Mrs. Preston. Make it real." She took the pen. Her hand didn't shake. She signed her name with heavy, deliberate strokes. She felt the ghost of Thomas standing behind her. She felt the weight of 9 years of invisible labor suddenly becoming visible. She walked out of the office. Sam was waiting by the wagon. He didn't ask to see the paper. He just helped her up onto the seat, and they drove home. But Nellie didn't stop at her own victory. Winning her land back was justice for herself. But she had seen the rot inside Millhaven Creek. She had seen how easily people like Martha Higgins folded to fear. She had seen how the law could be used as a club to beat the illiterate into submission. She wasn't going to let that happen again. 2 weeks later, on a crisp Wednesday evening, the large kitchen at the O'Connor Ranch was glowing with lantern light. The large oak table was cleared of plates and stew pots. Instead, it was covered in lined paper, small chalkboards, and freshly sharpened pencils. Jimmy, the young ranch hand, sat at the end of the table. Beside him sat Elias. Across from them sat 2 women from town, wives of men who owed money to the bank. Sam leaned against the doorframe, drinking coffee, watching. Nellie stood at the head of the table. She held a piece of chalk. She had a sample work contract written out on a small blackboard. "Look at Clause 3, Nellie instructed, pointing the chalk at the board. "Right here, where it says deductions for boarding and feed. This is where they trap you. If you can't read the numbers, a foreman can claim you ate more than you earned, and suddenly you owe him labor for free." Jimmy squinted at the board. He slowly copied the words onto his paper. His tongue stuck out the side of his mouth in deep concentration. One of the town women, Sarah, raised her hand hesitantly. "Mrs. Preston? My husband signed a paper with the feed store last month. He just put an X because he don't know his letters. How do we know what he gave away?" Nellie put the chalk down. She rested her hands on the table and looked at the small group sitting in her kitchen. "You don't know," Nellie said gently but firmly. "And that is exactly what men like Hiram Vance count on. They rely on the dark." She walked around the table. "Listen to me, all of you," Nellie said, her voice carrying the absolute certainty of a woman who had fought the devil and won. "Education is the sharpest weapon we have to defend our human rights. A gun can protect your body, but reading protects your life. When you do not know your letters, you are blind, folded in a room full of thieves. Once you can read a contract, once you can understand the math on a ledger, no man can ever steal your sweat again." She looked down at Jimmy. She tapped his paper. "Knowing how to read is knowing your own worth. When they hand you a paper, you don't just put an X. You read it, and if it's not fair, you hand it back." Jimmy nodded slowly. He gripped his pencil a little tighter. Sam watched her from the doorway. He felt a swell of pride so massive it physically ached in his chest. She wasn't just a rancher. She was a force of nature. She was rebuilding the foundation of the town right here at their kitchen table. The next afternoon, Nellie was out on the porch churning butter. The rhythmic thump, thump, thump of the wooden dash was a comforting sound. A shadow fell across the steps. Nellie looked up. Beatrice Jackson was standing at the bottom of the stairs. She wore her usual faded gray dress, but she held a stiff piece of manila paper in her hands. Nellie stopped churning. She wiped her hands on a towel and walked down the steps. "Bea," Nellie said warmly. Bea held out the paper. Her hands, rough from decades of lye soap and boiling water, were trembling, just slightly. Nellie took the paper. She recognized the seal. It was from Harold Fitch's office. Nellie had gone to Fitch a week ago. She had paid his retainer out of her own pocket. She told him to go to the county records and find the original parcel map for the creekside. She told him to file a squatter's rights claim, backed by adverse possession laws, for the wash house Bea had occupied and maintained for over 10 years. Nellie looked at the paper. It was a finalized, stamped deed. Property owner, Beatrice Jackson. Nellie looked up. Bea's dark eyes were shining. The fierce, unyielding woman who had stood up to the entire town in that courtroom was finally letting her guard down. 10 years, Bea whispered. Her voice cracked. 10 years I boiled their dirt out of their shirts, and they never looked at me. Now they gotta look at this. "It's yours, Bea," Nellie said softly. She reached out and grasped Bea's hands. "No one can ever tell you to move. No one can ever push you off that creek. It is yours in ink and blood." In ink. Bea looked down at the paper. She carefully folded it and pressed it to her chest. "You did this, Nellie," Bea said. "No," Nellie shook her head. I just bought the ink. You built the foundation. You spoke the truth when no one else would. Bee smiled, a deep, beautiful smile. We make a mighty fine pair of ghosts, don't we? Not ghosts anymore, Nellie smiled back. Not ever again. That evening, the air turned cool. A hint of autumn was creeping into the Texas wind. Nellie sat on the porch. She had her ledger in her lap, the real one. Sam came out of the house. He held 2 cups of coffee. He handed her one. He sat down in the wooden chair beside her. They didn't say anything for a long time. They just watched the sun drop below the ridge, turning the sky into a sea of fire and gold. Nellie opened the ledger. She picked up her pencil. She turned to a fresh blank page. September 1878. She wrote the number of cattle. She wrote the projected yield for the winter wheat. She wrote down the attendance for the Wednesday night reading class. Then she paused. She looked over at Sam. He was watching the horizon. His profile was strong, calm. The silence around him wasn't broken anymore. It was peaceful. Nellie looked back at the page. She moved the pencil to the bottom of the entry. Ranch managers. She wrote Eleanor Preston. And right beside it, on the exact same line, she wrote Samuel O'Connor. The work wasn't done. The town still had healing to do. The winter was coming. But the foundation was solid, and the house belonged to them both. The cold came down hard in December. It was the kind of cold that froze the mud solid, the kind that made the horses blow white steam in the dark. But inside the kitchen of the O'Connor ranch, it was warm. The Wednesday night reading class had just finished. The last student, Jimmy, walked out the back door. He pulled his collar up against the wind. The door clicked shut behind him. The room fell quiet. Sam was standing near the stove. He didn't say anything. He just reached down and picked up a wooden chair. He carried it to the corner. He stacked it. He went back for another. He had done this every Wednesday for 3 months. He didn't ask to do it. He didn't want thanks. He just saw work that needed doing, and he did it. Nellie stood at the head of the table. She held a damp rag. She wiped the white chalk dust from the small slate board. She watched him. She watched the way his broad shoulders moved under his flannel shirt. She watched the quiet, steady rhythm of the man. He set the last chair in place. He turned around. He caught her looking. He didn't look away. He never did anymore. Nellie set the rag down on the table. The wet cloth made a soft slap against the wood. "Leave the rest, Sam," Nellie said. Her voice was quiet in the empty room. "I want to talk to you." Sam stopped. He wiped his hands on his denim trousers. He walked over. He didn't sit. He stood across the table from her. "I'm listening," he said. Nellie looked at the clean slate board. Then she looked at him. "I answered an ad in a newspaper," Nellie began. Her words were slow, measured. "You asked for a practical arrangement, a woman to cook, a woman to keep the books. You explicitly asked for no romance." Sam nodded slowly. "I did." "I came here with a lie," Nellie continued. "I came here for a piece of paper in a safe. We got a war instead. We fought it. We won it." "We did," Sam agreed. Nellie took a breath. The air in the kitchen smelled like burnt coffee and chalk dust. It smelled like home. "But the war is over now," Nellie said. She looked him dead in the eye. "I have half the deed to this land. I have my name on the bank account. I don't need a husband to put a roof over my head. I don't need a man to speak for me in town." Sam stood perfectly still. His face didn't change, but his eyes darkened. He thought she was saying goodbye. He thought she was packing her bags. He braced himself for the hit. "For thousands of years," Nellie said, her voice ringing clear and steady, "a woman's choice in marriage wasn't a choice at all. It was survival. You married a man so you wouldn't starve. You married a man so the law would let you exist. You married for protection. That is not love, Sam. That is a hostage situation dressed up in white lace." Sam swallowed hard. He listened. "When a woman is forced to marry to survive, her consent means nothing," Nellie stated. She wasn't lecturing. She was telling him her absolute truth. True freedom for a woman is the ability to stand on her own 2 feet. It is the ability to look at a man and know she does not need his money, she does not need his land, and she does not need his protection. She took a step around the table. She closed the distance between them. "I have my freedom now," Nellie said. She looked up into his weathered face. "I don't need you, Sam O'Connor. Not to survive." Sam's jaw clenched. "I know." "So," Nellie said softly, "I want you to understand exactly what I am saying. I am choosing to stay. I am not staying out of obligation. I am not staying because of that piece of paper in the safe. I am choosing you. Because you are a good man. Because you learned how to use your voice. Because you are worthy of being chosen." Sam let out a breath. It was shaky, ragged, like he had been holding it for months. He looked at her. He looked at the fierce, brilliant, unyielding woman standing in his kitchen. He didn't pull her into his arms. He didn't kiss her. Not yet. He turned around. He walked out of the kitchen. Nellie stood there. She frowned. That wasn't the reaction she expected. A moment later, Sam walked back in. He was holding a thick brown manila envelope. He walked up to the table. He pulled a document from the envelope. He laid it flat on the wood. He smoothed the edges with his heavy hands. "I went to Austin last week," Sam said. His voice was thick. "While you were teaching." Nellie looked at the paper. It was heavy parchment, legal bond. "The judge ruled a 50-50 split," Sam said. He looked down at the paper. "But a judge's ruling is just a court order. It's the law telling us what we have to do. I didn't want the law deciding what happens in this house." He tapped the paper with his finger. "This is a permanent binding deed of trust," Sam said. He looked up at her. His eyes were fierce. "I had a lawyer draft it. It supersedes the court order. It takes this ranch, every blade of grass, every head of cattle, and it splits it dead even. Forever. No matter what happens with Hiram Vance's criminal trial. Even if Vance wins his appeal and the state tries to give the land back to me. This paper legally binds my half to your half, irrevocable." Nellie stared at the document. Her name was typed perfectly across the top. "Sam," she whispered. "Why?" "Because you were right," Sam said. His voice was a low, steady rumble. It filled the room. "You said a marriage for survival is just a hostage situation. I agree, and I will not hold the keys to the cell." He stepped closer to her. "Listen to me, Eleanor," Sam said. He spoke the words like a vow. "True love has no room for charity. It has no room for leverage. If I hold a legal advantage over you, even a small one, then we are not equals. If I can take the roof off your head when I get angry, then I am not your husband. I am your warden." Nellie felt the sting of tears in her eyes. She didn't blink them away. "A marriage is only worth having if both people are completely equal," Sam stated, his voice ringing with absolute conviction. "Equal in their rights, equal in their wealth, equal in their voice. Equality isn't a gift I am giving you. It is the only foundation that can hold the weight of what I feel for you. I won't build a life with you on anything less." He reached into his shirt pocket. He pulled out a black ink pen. He set it on the table right next to the document. "I already signed it," Sam said. He pointed to the bottom of the page. His signature was there, bold and dark. "I need your signature to make it real." Nellie looked at the pen. She looked at the signature. She thought about the 9 years she spent building this farm in the shadows. She thought about the rain on the train platform. She thought about the heavy leather coat he put over her shivering shoulders. She picked up the pen. She leaned over the table. She didn't hesitate. She signed her name. Eleanor Preston O'Connor. She set the pen down. The ink gleamed wet in the lantern light. Sam looked at the signature. He reached out. He picked up the paper. He carefully blew on the ink to dry it. He folded it. He put it back in the envelope. He set the envelope down. Then, he finally looked at her. Really looked at her. The space between them was gone. The shadows were gone. The leverage, the fear, the past, all of it, gone. He reached out. He didn't grab her. He placed his large, rough hands gently on either side of her face. His thumbs brushed across her cheekbones. His hands were warm. They felt like safety. They felt like home. "You came here with a plan," Sam whispered. His face was inches from hers. "You fought like a wildcat. You didn't yell. You didn't scream. You just brought the truth to the light." "I had to," Nellie breathed. "I know," Sam said. His thumb stroked her skin. "But you don't have to fight alone anymore. I am here. I am standing right beside you. If the world comes for you again, they have to go through me first." Nellie closed her eyes. A single tear slipped down her cheek. Sam caught it with his thumb. She raised her hands. She rested them flat against his chest. She felt the heavy, steady thud of his heart beneath the flannel. She opened her eyes. She looked up at him. "No romance, you said," Nellie whispered. A small, tearful smile broke across her face. Sam let out a low, rough laugh. It was a beautiful sound. "I was a fool back then," Sam said softly. "I didn't know what I was asking for." He lowered his head. He didn't rush. He gave her all the time in the world to pull away. She didn't. She leaned up. Their lips met. It wasn't a desperate, frantic kiss. It was deep. It was solid. It was the sealing of a contract written in the soul, not on paper. It tasted like coffee and cold air, and the promise of tomorrow. Nellie slid her arms around his neck. Sam wrapped his arms around her waist. He pulled her flush against him. He held her like he would never, ever let her go. And for the first time in her life, Nellie didn't feel trapped by a man's arms. She felt entirely, completely free. The morning came up slow and quiet. The frost was thick on the ground. It made the prairie grass look like it was spun from glass. The sky was a pale, icy blue. Nellie stood on the front porch. She had a thick woolen shawl wrapped around her shoulders. She held a tin cup of coffee in her hands. The steam curled up, warming her face. The front door creaked open. Sam stepped out onto the porch. He held his own cup of coffee. He walked over. He stood right beside her. Their shoulders brushed. They didn't say good morning. They didn't need to. They looked out at the land. The west pasture stretched out toward the tree line. The dirt was hard with frost, but beneath it the soil was changing. The lime powder she had written about, the powder he had spread with his own hands, was doing its work. It was killing the acid. It was making the ground ready for the spring. "It's going to be a good yield," Sam said. His voice was a low rumble in the quiet morning air. "It will," Nellie agreed. She took a sip of her coffee. She looked at the fences. She looked at the barn. She looked at the man standing beside her. They had taken the long way around. They had waded through lies and theft and the heavy, crushing silence of a town afraid of the truth. But they had made it out. They hadn't just reclaimed a piece of dirt. They had built a foundation that no banker, no judge, and no crooked law could ever tear down. They had built it on truth. They had built it on absolute equality. Sam shifted his weight. He reached out with his free hand. He wrapped his arm around her waist and pulled her close to his side. Nellie leaned her head against his shoulder. She watched the sun break over the ridge. The light hit the frosted grass, turning the whole world to gold. She took another breath of the cold Texas air. She was standing on her land. She was standing next to her equal. She was finally, completely home. On this channel, we share stories of the Wild West, cowboy tales, love, motherhood, human empathy, and the enduring strength between people. The message is clear. Your voice matters. Use it, protect it, and never let it be taken away. If this story resonated with you, like, comment your thoughts, share it with others, and subscribe for more powerful stories. This story exists within the realm of fiction, where imagination shapes reality. Any similarities to real-life individuals, organizations, or events are entirely coincidental. The author does not endorse or represent any real entity through the content of this work.
The dust settles, the courtroom empties, and the prairie grows quiet again. But what lingers is not just the victory of a woman reclaiming her land, it is something deeper, something harder earned. This story is not simply about Eleanor Preston winning back what was stolen from her. It is about the long, painful journey of reclaiming one's voice, one's dignity, and one's rightful place in a world that tried to erase it. What we witness here is the quiet power of persistence. Eleanor did not win because she was the loudest or the strongest in the room. She won because she refused to disappear. Even when the law stood against her, even when the town turned its back, even when silence would have been the safer choice, she kept going. And that teaches us something essential. Justice does not always come quickly, and it rarely comes easily. But when it is pursued with truth, courage, and unwavering conviction, it has a way of breaking through even the thickest walls of power. There is also a lesson in the way this story handles equality, not as an abstract idea, but as something lived, tested, and proven. Sam O'Connor's transformation reminds us that being a good person is not enough if we remain silent in the face of injustice. Silence, as Eleanor said, always chooses a side. True integrity is not found in neutrality. It is found in the courage to stand up, to speak out, and to defend the dignity of others, even when it is uncomfortable or costly. Respect is not shown in words alone, but in actions that affirm another person's worth as equal to our own. And then there is the deeper truth about love, not the kind born from necessity, but the kind born from freedom. Eleanor did not stay because she had to. She stayed because she chose to. That distinction changes everything. Real love cannot exist where there is imbalance, fear, or dependency. It can only grow where there is equality, mutual respect, and the freedom to walk away, but the decision to remain. In that sense, this story reminds us that the strongest relationships are not built on need, but on choice. Perhaps one of the most powerful lessons lies in the role of knowledge and awareness, the ability to read, to understand contracts, to question authority. These are not small things. They are tools of survival, tools of protection, tools of empowerment. When people are denied knowledge, they are made vulnerable. But when they learn, when they understand, they become impossible to control. Eleanor didn't just reclaim her land, she helped others reclaim their power. And that is how true change spreads, not through one victory, but through many voices rising together. In the end, this story leaves us with a simple but enduring truth. Your work has value, your voice has weight, and your dignity is not something anyone has the right to take from you. No matter the time, no matter the place, no matter the odds, those who stand firmly in their truth will always shape the world around them. And maybe that's what the Wild West was really about. Not just survival, not just hardship, but the quiet, relentless fight to be seen, to be heard, and to belong.